We're going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully there's not too many people stuck in traffic, and they'll be joining us when they can get here. Good evening. My name is Bea Naon. I'm currently the co-chair of the Kirkland Alliance of Neighborhoods, and it is my pleasure and privilege to welcome you tonight to the first annual, we hope, State of the City presentation presented by the Kirkland Alliance of Neighborhoods. The Kirkland Alliance of Neighborhoods is comprised of our 12 neighborhood associations. That map is a little hard to read up there, but there's a better map right in front of me showing our various neighborhood associations. Every neighborhood has a board of directors, chair, and a representative that comes to CAN, the Kirkland Alliance of Neighborhoods, where we work together. And I'd like to just recognize neighborhood association leadership and CAN reps that are here tonight. If you are on the board of your neighborhood association or if you're a CAN rep, would you raise your hand? Lots of us here tonight. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it very, very much. And the website is there, but you just go to the City of Kirkland website. CAN's mission statement is there. This is a relatively new mission statement for us. It was adopted about a year ago. But most important, I think, is that last sentence, that CAN, the Kirkland Alliance of Neighborhoods, is an effective collegial voice for the neighborhoods and a valued resource for the city. And that's in keeping, too, with the City of Kirkland City Council goals. Their number one goal is neighborhoods. The citizens of Kirkland experience a high quality of life in their neighborhoods. The council goal to achieve active neighborhood participation and a high degree of satisfaction with neighborhood character, services, and infrastructure. So tonight we are pleased to have you here, our mayor, Amy Walen, and our city manager, Triplett. And I asked them to give us some information so that I could introduce them to you. And I got their resumes, and oh my goodness, there's a whole bunch of stuff up there. I'll just say that they are incredibly well educated. They work very hard, and they work hard not only for the city, but for the region and for the community, and I wouldn't even dream of reading that to you. I wanted you, though, to know more about them, and I thought, how are we going to do that? So I thought about this guy. Now, does everybody know who that is? If you don't, that is, of course, James Lipton from inside the Actors Studio. Would have loved to have brought him here tonight. There's just two problems. Number one, we have no budget for this event. So there's no way we can get him here. And secondly, if you are a follower of Inside the Actors Studio, you know that one of his standard questions for the people he interviews is to name their favorite curse word. And this is a G-rated presentation, so he was off the table. But we did come up with some questions for our mayor and our city manager. Just some general questions to start with: what neighborhood they live in, favorite place in Kirkland to take a walk. The city manager gave us, of course, a shameless plug for the Cross Kirkland Corridor. And if you haven't seen the Kirkland 2035 Wordle, it's up there in the back of the room. Ask them to indicate what word they contributed, and the mayor gave us walkable, and the city manager gave us livable. But we wanted to get a little away from Kirkland. We wanted to know, I think you can learn a lot about people from what they eat and how they eat it. So good to know that neither one of them take their coffee decaf. It's good to know that they have caffeine coursing through their veins at all times. But I think the mayor has got a serious issue with Oreos. And as for Triplett, he's just going to get that Oreo and just move on. Last TV series you binge watched, I might add 5 years ago, no one even would know what that meant. They both knew instantly what that meant. I shared with the mayor before tonight how much I appreciated her naming Calvin and Hobbes. I thought that was great. Now, I asked them about TV and their favorite late night host. I actually when I asked about what they did while they got ready in the AM, I had sort of like the Today Show or Morning Joe on my mind, but you can see that things are a little bit more hectic in their households, and good to know everybody is a good Northwesterner and they get wet to some extent in the rain. But here's what I want you to know about them as we move into tonight's presentation. Borrowing a little bit from the question that James Lipton always asks, twisting it a little bit, if Peter Kirk were to return to Kirkland today, what would you like to hear him say? And our mayor indicated, thank you for transforming an industrial town into a livable, walkable city, a great place to raise your kids. And our city manager would like him to say, thank you for preserving the waterfront for all residents. And in 10 words or less, as we're thinking about our vision for Kirkland, our personal vision, our mayor says, retain our small town feel. And our city manager, his vision is for Kirkland to remain one of the most livable cities in America. And with that, I thank you for coming tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to our mayor, Amy Walen.
Well, thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to introduce the other members of the Kirkland City Council who are here. Deputy Mayor Sweet is here. Councilmember Arnold is here, Jay Arnold. Councilmember Asher is here. Councilmember Nixon is here. And I don't think that Councilmember Kloba or Marcioni are here, but they are here with us in spirit. So we're all with you in spirit tonight. I also want to thank Beeve and Anna very much for inviting me to do this. I think it's surprising that we've never done it before. I think it should be the first annual, and it should be an annual event. I think this is a great opportunity and a great forum for the mayor to deliver the State of the City address. I'd also like to recognize our staff who do, I think you probably all know, an amazing job of putting on events like this and being here after hours. And thank you very much. Kari is here, and Marie, and I'm sure I'm missing some. Well, of course, the city manager is here as well. So you'll hear from him shortly. So I am going to get started. First, I'd like to express that it is a true privilege, and certainly the privilege of my lifetime, to have been selected as mayor of this great city by my colleagues on the council. It's a humbling yet inspiring experience to follow in the footsteps of Mayor Joan McBride, and I'd like to again recognize Joan for more than 16 years of hard work for this community. She advised me to embrace the idea of being a public servant, and that is my aspiration every day. It's my honor to be invited to your meeting and to deliver the mayor's annual State of the City address. I want to thank each and every one of you for being an active part of the Kirkland community. Our vision for Kirkland, our vision statement says that we are an attractive, vibrant, and inviting place to live, work, and visit. Without your advocacy, your involvement, your engagement, that vision cannot happen. Your associations provide information, organization, volunteerism, emergency preparedness, all services that our residents want and need. You create community. And on behalf of all of the City Council, I want to thank you for everything that you do and to assure you that this council is committed to helping you succeed. Confucius said, "Study the past if you would define the future." And William Shakespeare wrote in The Tempest that what is past is prologue. Therefore, before we look ahead, it's important to take a look back. Nearly 5 years ago now, was a time of challenge and uncertainty for the city of Kirkland. The previous council was often viewed as dysfunctional by our citizens. We were searching for a city manager for the first time in 12 years. The annexation of 31,000 new residents was a looming unknown. The Great Recession was deepening and city revenues plummeted. You probably remember that garbage cans were removed from parks and restrooms near playgrounds were closed. Our streets were developing cracks and potholes. Totem Lake Boulevard was constantly underwater. An abandoned, weed-infested railroad track was an ugly barrier that split Kirkland in half. Businesses were closing and jobs were being lost. That was not the Kirkland that our citizens expect nor deserve, and it was not the Kirkland that had been entrusted to us by the visionary councils, business owners, and residents that came before us. City leaders like Bill Woods, Nona Gans, Santos Contreras, and Al Locke had built us all a beautiful green city on the lake, a community with strong schools and safe streets, a community that had the courage to preserve a magical string of waterfront properties that have become the defining treasures of our city. A community that by thoughtful planning had resisted the tall towers of Bellevue and grew gracefully while retaining a small town feel. The challenge faced by the new council in 2009 was how to protect and restore that legacy. This council met that challenge with decisive, responsive government. Our former deputy mayor and current council member Doreen Marchioni insisted that we reestablish professional behavior and collegiality and led us in the adoption of our code of ethics to guide the council and the government. We hired an enthusiastic and talented new city manager. Mr. Triplett reminded us that the best way to achieve goals is to set them, and he helped the council establish an annual work program to ensure that we spent our resources on what was in the plan. The city manager combined the best of our existing team at City Hall with talented new voices, known and respected throughout the region, to attack our work program. The council and staff became a dynamic team whose only goal was and is the well-being of the constituents that we serve together. With relentless focus on the work plan, we successfully accomplished the largest single annexation in the history of this region. We leveraged our existing resources so that even as our population grew by 66%, we only increased our staff by 25%. We sharpened our pencils and made tough financial decisions. We cut budgets and programs. Most difficult of all, we laid off loyal and dedicated employees. Councilmember David Asher reminds us to create performance measures and to insist on accountability to our goals. We set aside millions of dollars to replenish our depleted reserves. In the teeth of the recession, our strong financial stewardship achieved the AAA credit rating that Kirkland retains to this day. We proposed prudent investments to our citizens who overwhelmingly passed our parks and streets levies in 2012. Councilmember Jay Arnold worked as a citizen advocate for responsible investment in our parks and open spaces. The council authorized nearly $5 million in stormwater pipes and culverts to solve flooding at Totem Lake. We spent another $5 million to purchase that rail line and turned it into the Cross-Kirkland corridor that now connects all of Kirkland rather than dividing it. We focused on jobs and development because a strong economic base helps keep our property taxes affordable. And decisive, responsive government is working. We're paving our streets, we're adding flashing beacons, you've seen them I'm sure, and building new sidewalks throughout the city. We restored our parks and we're acquiring new ones. The economy is rebounding. Google is expanding in Kirkland and bringing another 1,000 high-tech jobs to our city. We have hundreds of thousands of square feet of commercial development and hundreds of residential units in the permit pipeline. We're emerging from the tempest. Decisive, responsive government. Government that meets challenges and solves problems. That's what we've been for the last 4 years, and that's what we'll continue to be in the future. Because of decisive, responsive government, the state of the city is poised. We are poised to come into our own as the 6th largest city in King County and the 13th largest in Washington State. With renewed economic strength, we're poised to tackle the big issues and the big ideas. We're poised to be bold. We're poised to be a force to be reckoned with in the region. We must seize the opportunities before us. So what are these opportunities? What choices do we face to protect and enhance our quality of life? Many of the big ideas can be found in the city work plan. Mr. Triplett's going to review that with you shortly. We must remain fiscally disciplined even as revenues rebound. In 2021, we will lose almost $3.5 million annually as the state sales tax credit that made our annexation possible expires. To balance our budget and to retain our AAA credit rating, we must prepare for this lost revenue. We must partner with our employees to keep the cost of government sustainable, and we must forego the temptation of nice-to-have programs today and set aside revenues so that we can provide essential services tomorrow. But saving money is not enough. We must keep growing our economy as well. We must complete our development services plan and simplify our zoning code to keep our businesses thriving. We must make Park Place happen and redevelop the Totem Lake Mall. Councilmember Toby Nixon keeps us on task as we worked to complete our beautiful public safety building and now to implement our fire strategic plan to keep our citizens safe. We must find a way to replace the Juanita Aquatic Center when it closes in the coming years. Deputy Mayor Penny Sweet has consistently stated that our responsibility as a city with nearly 10 miles of shoreline cannot be without a pool that teaches our children to swim, allows our students to compete, and keeps our seniors fit. We must use our Parks and Roads levy to re-energize our neighborhoods, and we should help you, our neighborhood organizations, achieve more. You are the connectors and creators of community. You can be the structure by which we watch out for our children and watch over our seniors. One of the best ways that we've invested in our neighborhoods is by nearly completed, the interim trail and master plan for the Cross Kirkland corridor that connects our city. Probably our biggest task is to cease worrying about the future and to start preparing for it. We will do so as we update our comprehensive plan and create a vision for the city in 2035. Many of you, I think every one of you in this room, has been very helpful to us in defining that vision. We've heard from hundreds of residents and businesses throughout the city, and the vision is remarkably similar whether you're from Bridle Trails or Finn Hill, from Moss Bay or Kingsgate. Our citizens use these words to define the Kirkland of our future: livable, walkable, green, and vibrant. They expect and deserve to have us adopt a comprehensive plan and a transportation master plan that will deliver that vision. This City Council intends to do just that. But doing so will require courageous choices in the best interests of our city. It will require us to communicate openly and honestly with our citizens. It will require us to welcome the new jobs and housing that the Growth Management Act assigns to Kirkland. We must welcome them not simply because the law says that we must, but because doing so stops sprawl and protects our region's precious farms and forests, our streams and salmon. Welcoming growth also brings the goods and services that we want in our own city, and means that we don't have to drive to Woodinville or Bellevue to buy what we need. We can welcome this growth while still protecting our single-family neighborhoods and our environment. To accomplish this, we must accept density and channel growth into our multifamily zones and into our business districts and Totem Lake. In her final council meeting, Mayor McBride encouraged us to remember that every citizen is essential. She was right. It's often said that the measure of a great society is how it treats those who struggle the most. We must also plan for those who are less fortunate and who are not participating in the prosperity of the East Side. No child should be hungry in Kirkland. No adult should be homeless. Yet these problems exist. But with decisive and responsive government, Kirkland can partner with organizations like HopeLink, KIF, and Nourishing Networks to help solve them. Councilmember Shelley Kloba urges us that we must remain a just and compassionate city. As we dream big about our future, we must also stay grounded in the present. Even as we focus on Totem Lake as the city's economic heart, we must never lose sight of the downtown, which embodies its soul. Our incredible parks, galleries, and restaurants are wasted if businesses can't hang out a sign to attract customers, and those customers cannot find a parking space. We will take steps to fix these problems. The City Council will evaluate and implement concrete actions to make more effective use of current spaces and to increase the number of publicly available parking spaces in and around the downtown core. And as Kirkland plans to build things like streets, pools, shops, and housing, we must remember that our primary job is to serve people. We work hard at listening and solving problems, but we can always improve. Cafe Ladro posts a sign that says, "We believe that profound service improves the world." Kirkland should strive to provide profound service. I've asked my colleagues on the council to join me in creating a customer service initiative and a customer service pledge for Kirkland. We will demonstrate our commitment to responsive government by providing the best customer service in the region. My husband and I own Ford Hyundai of Kirkland. Ford's national campaign is that "and" is much better than "or." So it's better to get great gas mileage and great comfort rather than mileage or comfort. That "and" is better than "or" is also true for Kirkland. Our citizens want Kirkland that is green and vibrant, not a Kirkland that is livable or walkable. Kirkland city government must continue to be decisive and responsive. We must solve problems and meet challenges. We must plan for cars and buses and bicycles and pedestrians. Working together, we can have great businesses and great neighborhoods. We can have a thriving economy and a healthy environment. We can achieve prosperity and leave no one behind. This can be done by 2035, and we should strive to achieve it today. As your mayor, I pledge myself to working with all of you and our citizens and the City Council to make this vision possible. And together we will keep Kirkland, in Mr. Triplett's words, the most livable city in America. Thank you. And now I'm going to introduce our city manager, Mr. Triplett, our hardworking public servant himself.
Slideshow up here, and then I'll be right back. All right. So that is the definition of a hard act to follow. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I want to also join the mayor in thanking Bea and Anna for having this suggestion. I think it's a wonderful idea for us to have an opportunity to come before the Alliance of Neighborhoods. So appreciated you guys thinking of this, and it's an honor to be here. What they asked me to do is actually go over the work program. And one of the things I always like to say before I start this presentation is the presentation itself is about 15 to 20 minutes, but every item on this slideshow could be its own 1-hour presentation. So I'm going to go fast through a lot of stuff, but the mayor and I will be available to take questions afterwards. So as I go through this, go ahead and hold your questions, and we're more than happy to talk about any of the topics as we get to this. So, decisive responsive government. As you heard the mayor say, the 2013-14 work program, which was adopted by the City Council in the fall of 12, was really about how do we make sure that we address what the citizens have asked us to keep this the greatest city in America. So we start off being responsive by finding out what is it that the citizens want and what do they think of Kirkland. And so every 2 years, we do a community survey. The council authorizes us to do a statistically valid survey. And what I put up here is both the 2012 survey results, and then we actually did this again in the spring of this year, and it has the 2014 results. And one of the nice things you can see is we inched up just a little bit. We still got to get to that 90%, but what you're actually seeing is the people who think we are very good are now starting to think we're excellent. So we're moving up, both in terms of the number of people who really like us and the intensity of how people feel about Kirkland is getting higher, and so that's a good thing. The satisfactory folks, we got to find a better way to get them over here, and these negative folks, at least we're seeing them go down, but we may have to have Bothell annex that section, wherever that is. So, but it's not just what our citizens currently think about this. I think many of you may have seen, we were just told last week that Kirkland was listed as the 5th place in the nation, small city, to live, and I think that's worth a round of applause. We didn't even know this evaluation was going on, so it was very cool to receive this award. It's a real honor for the citizens, an honor for the council, and certainly an honor for the staff. But it's a team effort for everybody to make Kirkland the exceptional place that it is. What I have up here on the top is that this is our job, is not just to keep this as one of the top 5 places in the country, but to make sure it's not just this way now, but it's this way all the way through 2035. So what I have up there is actually our vision statement from the Cross Kirkland Corridor Master Plan. And so this is the bridge which will be going over Totem Lake Boulevard and 124th and leading to our fantastic Totem Lake Park that we're going to build. We've already acquired the land for it, so I'll come back to this. But it's our job and my job on the council's behalf to make sure that we stay this way for the next 20 years, not just for today. And so how do we do that? One of the things that we do in being a decisive, responsive government is we actually do something with the survey results that you give us. So when the citizens express how they feel about it, we listen and we actually try to respond. And many times you hear the budget is the ultimate policy document, and it doesn't really matter until you put some money behind it. So what we did, and this is the, we call this the Kirkland Quad Chart, and it's divided up into 2 axes. One is if it's high importance to the citizens, and then how well are we doing from low performance to high performance. So if Kirkland was doing a perfect job on everything you care about, in the intensity with which you care about it, all of our questions that we ask in the survey would be more or less along this line. So you can see the green things are, the green lines here are the services we provide, that the citizens are very happy with what we do, and we're doing it at about the importance that they give to it. What we did in the stars category is we actually went one step further, and we actually showed the council and the citizens how much money we put behind the things that the citizens think are the most important. And what you can see is that the top things that citizens care about the most, public safety, over 65% of our budget goes to the things that the citizens said were the things that mattered the most, which is police, fire, and emergency medical services. What we're also trying to do is keep everything that's red. This is an indication of you're not doing as good a job as the citizens think you should, given the importance they rank it. And that's what shows up in the red. And our goal through the work program and everything else is to start moving these over to the green. So what you see here is maintaining streets. Even though we put a lot of money to maintaining streets, that was one of the issues that led to us actually proposing a street levy. Is this poor ranking for streets is something that came through consistently. And so we said to the city council, let's ask, is the public really willing to put some money behind this? And so the public said yes. They passed our street levy, and Kirkland has made a commitment to maintain its level of investment to match what the street levy puts in. And so over the next 20 years, you're going to see tremendous improvement in our streets. And I think you're already seeing it now, in the overlays we're doing, particularly on the arterials. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about all of these, the attracting and keeping businesses, the traffic flow, maintaining streets, and zoning and land use. Those are the issues that we frequently get dinged on in the survey. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of these that are the stars and the successes, where our performance sort of meets our importance. But because police and fire are something that matters the most and that we put the most money behind, we always want to make sure that we're doing it right, and that we're doing it well, and that we're doing it in a way that keeps our public safe. So the first key element of the strategic plan was our fire strategic plan implementation. And so one of our big issues has been the evaluation and siting of a new fire station up in Finn Hill to improve response times up there. We have several gaps in the north end of the city, both in the Finn Hill area and the Kingsgate area. And so we're going through a process which will probably come back to the city council probably at the end of this year, where we're going to actually pick a site and begin construction of a brand new fire station in the north part of the city. We're also evaluating potential funding sources for future. We have a lot of work to do. The fire strategic plan highlighted many millions of dollars of things that we could do to improve services, and we definitely want to get to those things, but it's going to take some time to figure out how to fund them all. Anyone here went to the grand opening of the Public Safety Building, and now the Kirkland Justice Center? So we invested over $40 million in creating a combined court, jail, and police headquarters, and it's spectacular. One of the nice things about this, it kind of tells you how everything comes together in the city with our high credit rating and our fiscal responsibility. Buying and renovating this building cost us a little over $40 million. Our estimates for having located and built a building brand new was anywhere from $60 to $75 million. So not only did we create a really wonderful building for ourselves that is creating all sorts of operational improvements for police and courts, but we saved ourselves about $20 million from reusing a building that was currently underutilized. Oh, I should also note that in each of these, you saw the handout there that identifies the council adopted goals. And so each of these, we highlight at the bottom which goal the work program is actually implementing. So you saw a lot of red and traffic and congestion and street maintenance, and a lot of keying about performance in terms of things like pedestrian safety and walkability. So one of the largest commitments we've made in the work program is to adopt the first ever citywide multimodal transportation plan. And this is looking at everything. It's looking at not just street maintenance and overlays, but it's looking at bike lanes and pedestrian crossings and rapid flashing beacons, and of course, the development of the Cross Kirkland corridor. And this is for many, many reasons. First and foremost, for the safety of our citizens, but also to have dependable infrastructure, which is one of our key goals, for economic development, to keep our neighborhoods livable and walkable. So all of those elements are going into the Transportation Master Plan, which has been underway for about 18 months. The council is going to actually get a study session briefing on this in about, I think, 3 weeks from now, and then this will probably be adopted with the comprehensive plan sometime around June of 2015. One sub-element of that is completing the Cross Kirkland Corridor Master Plan. This was courtesy of Kari Page, who took a photo of the same section a couple different years apart, and so we had our rails that everyone walked on. We took them out and we had the ballast, and now this is actually the actual interim trail crushed gravel path. Has anyone had a chance to be on it since the, wow, okay, that's impressive. So the gravel path is now all the way up to 6th, and it's going to move up to 87th fairly quickly. Our current contract requires the contractor to be finished by December 2nd, and then there's some financial penalties in there if they don't get done on time. They're about 2 weeks behind schedule at the moment, but we're hoping they're going to add some crews and catch up. One important note on this is it's not just a gravel trail. We're also at every intersection where there's a straight. We're actually putting in rectangular flashing beacons, crosswalks, and we're actually putting in sidewalk access so that people have a safe crossing on the corridor. And then the City Council funded and adopted the Cross-Kirkland Corridor Master Plan, which was completed earlier this year, and you can find it on our website. And that sets out our $70 to $90 million vision for the final corridor, and we have some discussion of the corridor master plan up here. But so in the interim, we're going to have a great interim trail, but the goal is, of course, to start finding money and ways to begin to implement that ultimate vision. One of the things, again, highlighting the quad chart where it said zoning and regulation were a challenge, the City Council gave us money to go forth and do a study of our development services and to simplify our zoning code. And we went out and hired a group, Zucker Systems. And what was really nice is they did give us about 220 things that we could change, and I think we've done about 189 so far. What was interesting about the recommendations is they're everything from changing your technology to putting your card up on the counter so people could get it easily. So there was a lot of these we were able to check off, quite simply. They included things like fillable forms and people being able to submit permits online. So some things that were in the process, other things we had to do to change our policies and procedures. But we're making great strides, and we actually think we'll have achieved almost every one of these recommendations by spring of next year. And you're going to see some of the final ones play out in the budget proposal that we make. But what was really nice is these folks go around the country and evaluate permit departments and development services departments. And Mr. Zucker met with me and also included this in his review. He said, you have one of the better permit systems in the country. And he was very, very impressed with particularly how the customer service that was provided by the employees to the customers. So even though we had some places to improve, he thought that the talent and caliber of our staff was, and their customer service ethic was really impressive. So the other big task required by state law that's in our planning department is to complete the comprehensive plan update. Many of you have been participating in that, and we appreciate that. We're going to give you more chances in the next 6 months. And so we're looking at everything, our economic development plan, our zoning regulations, our comprehensive plan. The transportation master plan is a sub-element of this, so all of this stuff comes together. And we did so much outreach on so many things this year that it was actually, I think, Councilmember Asher who said, we need to have some kind of umbrella way of thinking about all of this. This was at the retreat of 2013, because we knew we were going to be updating so many things. We had to find a way as the staff and the public to stay coordinated. We thought we can't go out 17 times on 17 issues to the same people. We need to find a way to do all this together. And so they gave us money again. Thank you, Council. And Kirkland 2035 was born. Your voice, your vision, and your future. And so we have been combining all of these efforts, and you're seeing it again, up on the wall and in the information you have out there. But we try to find ways to bring people together, to use social media, to combine our forums, to combine our presentations so that we sort of one-stop shopping for all of the residents and the businesses, so people didn't have to try to find us. We helped find them. And so, shameless plug for our next one, Comprehensive Plan Open House, is Wednesday, November 12th. And once again, all of the major plans will be available, but a big focus on the Comprehensive Plan and the Transportation Master Plan. You can also look at the Parks Plan and the Surface Water Master Plan update, but we would love to see you there. And I think we're combining this with some of the other meetings that are also happening. So once again, trying to give people an opportunity to come together and check off many things at the same time. One of the key elements of the master plan, or of the work program, is always adopting the next budget. And I want to spend just a tiny bit of time on this slide, because one of the mandates the City Council gave us is to maintain that AAA credit rating. And as we like to joke, we actually have a better credit rating than the federal government as the City of Kirkland. That's a sad state of affairs for the federal government, but it takes real fiscal discipline, and it takes setting aside a lot of money for reserves to achieve that as a local government. And this council has done that. They've actually adopted financial policies that require us to save first. So as new money comes into the system, it gets actually put in our reserves before we can invest in anything new. But what this shows is every 2 years when we adopt a budget, like all local governments, Kirkland is required to have a balanced budget. So we cannot be out of whack. We either have to raise revenues, cut services, or have those things come into alignment. Revenues and operations have to come into alignment. What the red chart shows you, line here, is that if nothing changes, either in our revenue picture or our expenditure picture, we are going to have a gap between revenues and expenditures. The bottom line here is where the city is without the annexation sales tax credit that the mayor mentioned. So right now, those lines are pretty darn close together. You notice they are balanced 2013-14, and we got to balance them again. And it's not too hard to do that for the next 2 years, a couple $1 million apart. But the reason for that is that we have an artificial revenue source, which is the $3.5 million we get from the state. And if you took that revenue source away, you'd see we'd be more like a $6-7 million, almost a 7 to 8% budget gap. And so part of the challenge we face as a city is in 2021 that goes away. So we have to close that gap in one of two ways. We either need to have enough economic development that new revenues come in, which is my favorite, or we need to cut costs or eliminate resources to the point where those two lines meet. And the reality is we need to do both of those things. And that's been the clear direction that we've gotten from the council. And so the rest of the work program you're going to see really reflects how are we going to try to both raise revenue and control costs. So hopefully we're finally getting close to a breakthrough on this. One of our top priorities, as always, is to find a way to make Totem Lake pop. And the City Council in 2010 adopted a Totem Lake Action Plan. And the Totem Lake Action Plan said we will prioritize Totem Lake in all of our capital programs, and all of our departments will figure out the best things we can do to invest to make Totem Lake happen. Not just the mall, but also the businesses, things around it. So Totem Lake is also where we have Evergreen Hospital, which is our single largest employer in the city of Kirkland, but lots of folks focus on the mall. We did a whole host of things, and the mayor mentioned some. We spent over $5 million addressing flooding. So 2010, every time it rained, Totem Lake Boulevard flooded. 2011, after we invested, in 2012, after we finished our culverts, Totem Lake has never been shut down because of rain since those investments. So the city really spent a lot of money to try to make sure that that went well, and it's not finished yet. We have one more project to do next summer, but it's been huge. What we've also been doing is each and every time the city makes an investment in Totem Lake, we call the Totem Lake mall owners and tell them, hey, we just invested $5 million next to you. It's time for you guys to do something. We brought the Cross Kirkland corridor. We called them up, hey, we just bought the Cross Kirkland corridor. When we adopted the Totem Lake Park Master Plan, we sent them the plan. We said, this is what the city is going to do right next to you guys. When we bought the Yuppie Pawn Shop to be the anchor for that new park, we sent them that too and said, look, we already bought the section that's right next to you. Let's get together and talk about how we can seamlessly blend these things together. We've invested almost $7 million in the extension of 120th Avenue across and it goes in front of the infinity of Kirkland from Lake Washington Institute of Technology coming down 120th. So all of that, every single time something happens, we've been sending it to the key businesses, particularly the mall, but also the others around it, and saying, the city is investing. And we are ready, and so now it's time for you guys to come join us. And so for the first time in 4 years, they finally did. They came out, and they said, you know what? We need to do something. We don't want to lose the opportunity here. So some of you who've heard my presentations in the past know that the joint owners of the mall have been in a lawsuit with each other. And Coventry & Associates, which is the majority owner, is the group that we met with. And when we met with them, it was probably June of this year. They actually flew out with a new financial group and a development group, and they said, we're getting serious about this. We're going to try to end this lawsuit this year, and we want to come to you with a proposal for developing the mall. They haven't done that yet. So unfortunately, I can't tell you that it's actually happened. But it was the first time that we didn't just get the, hey, thanks very much, we'll get back to you someday, and then they hung up again. So again, about once a month, Ellen Miller-Wolf, our economic development manager, and I, we ping them, we call them. She has friends back east. Every time she goes back east, she looks them up. She goes and visits them, has coffee. So we're sort of relentless on the mall owners saying, hey, it's time to step up. So my expectation is that sometime in the next 2 months, we're going to get a visit and we're going to see a pre-app meeting and they're going to want to do something. But until that day actually happens, all I can be is very cautiously optimistic because for the first time, they're actually talking about a project and not telling us why they can't. One of the other commitments the council made was private sector partnerships to attract our tenants. And this was actually our current mayor and our former mayor actually told us, give us the names of like the 7 biggest property owners that should redevelop. And we're going to go visit them. And that's what they did. They actually got on an airplane. They flew down to California. And they started meeting with people who owned like the public storage facilities and the Totem Park, where I say the Kentucky Fried Chicken because that's where I go. But some people go to the wine and the art galleries and other things, but I'm always picking up food for my kids. But all of those have potential to redevelop. And in fact, the current regulations and comp plan language encourages that. There could be as much as 1,000 new housing units on top of retail and mixed use there right now. And as a result of their visit, we've actually had 2 owners say that they're willing to explore developing. And so again, we don't yet have formal pre-application meetings, but we've had 2 people come out and visit us from the Totem Lake Park site who've been talking about wanting to actually get the master plan going and talk about redeveloping that area. So that's very exciting. And then also Park Place. So along with the mall, Park Place has been the one big thing that we're constantly saying, when's something going to happen at Park Place? As I think all of you know, the primary owner of Park Place, Prudential, was in a partnership with a group called Touchstone. Touchstone sold their interest back to Park Place. Their vision was a little too grand and they couldn't pull it off. That's the drawing of it right there. We didn't know what Prudential was going to do. We had several different meetings with them as the city staff and said, we really want you to still develop. The good news is they chose to decide to do something. And at one point they were looking at maybe they're just going to flip it. They talked about maybe just holding on to it for 10 years and not really doing anything. We as a city kept encouraging them, please develop it. You can make money. It's a great place to be. And so we expect to see a development proposal on Park Place coming from Prudential sometime in the next month or so. And it hasn't happened yet. Again, we're sort of at that place where they're saying all the right things, but until they actually get in and actually submit something, we're not there yet. But we are getting all indications that that's going to happen. So, that really could change a lot of things. My finance director keeps saying either one of these is sort of a earthquake in the financial situation. And if both of them happen in the next couple of years, it would be huge in terms of creating the revenue necessary to sustain the budget. But the council's also been very clear with us that we also need to control our costs. About 75% of our budget goes to salaries and wages of our employees. And that's a good thing. It means we have some of the best and brightest in terms of police and firefighters and public works folks and city managers. And we need to pay a competitive wage, but we also need to be respectful of the taxpayers and the ratepayers who pay our salaries. And so we've been working very closely with our unions and our non-union employees about really moderating the way wages and healthcare benefits are growing in Kirkland. In 2010, 2011, our employees didn't get any increase. They had flat wages. In 2014, they also got a 0% increase. And these have been partnership negotiations with our unions where they've agreed because of the Great Recession that they wanted to preserve jobs, they wanted to preserve services. And right now, we're working with them on what we think is going to be one of the most cool and innovative comprehensive changes in how we do healthcare in the city of Kirkland that we hope will also save us a lot of money and actually be pretty groundbreaking. And I could talk more about that. But so I want people to know we're looking at both sides of the equations, generating revenue and also controlling costs. And all of this with the goal of making sure we're sustainable in 2021. So that is the tempest that the mayor was talking about here. It looks like we might be emerging from the storm, although you can still see these little clouds here. That's Russia and Ukraine, and who knows what's going on over there with ISIS and everything else. But so, anytime, like all cities, like all governments, we are subject to global and national forces that could change the economy dramatically. And so we want to always be cognizant of that and cautious about that. But even with all that, the east side in particular in Kirkland as well as seeing a bit of a renaissance of development. And it's being driven by the high-tech industry, which is a good thing, and it's being driven by car sales, which is a phenomenal thing. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. But I wanted to show just a few things, and this is one of my last slides. The sheer amount of development that's now starting to happen in Kirkland. Before anyone really freaks out about this number here, that is that Totem Lake Park project, which, if it were to happen, could be as much as 1,000 new units, but they've talked about it as being phased in over about a 10-year period. So we count it whenever they come in and start talking about it, but that's probably a little bit off in the distance in terms of all of that development. But you can see under construction, we've got quite a bit going on. We end up, totals are down here. We could have as much as 220,000 more commercial institutions. That's things like Fairfax Hospital and the Evergreen Hospital doing expansion. And then we have a lot of office, small and mid-sized office projects going, as well as development. So all of this is working. Our focus on trying to keep the quality of life high, keep our city whole, and relentlessly investing in infrastructure so that people want to be here is paying off. We're seeing a rebound in development. We're seeing more jobs coming, and we're very happy about that. So hopefully we can keep sailing off into the sunset and things will get better. But I want to finish, my last two slides are about really keeping that quality of life that was sort of central to the mayor's speech and to my opening, which is, with all of that, we never lose sight of the fact that really what we are is a city made up of neighborhoods. And we, unfortunately, in the time of budget cuts, we had to get a little bit away from that. And so one of the commitments the City Council made in the work program was a recommitment to re-energizing neighborhoods. And so we've been using the road and park levy money, as well as the Cross Kirkland Corridor Master Plan in this process, the Kirkland 2035 process, to really try to re-energize the neighborhood groups that you're all part of, as well as our boards and commissions, and say, tell us what we should be, how can we work together, how can we invest, how can we make your communities better, how can we make the whole city better. And I think, as evidenced by you guys being here, I think it's working really, really well. And then finally, this was an addition that was made last fall. This was the decisive responsive government. We had the users of Juanita Aquatic Center coming to us saying the school district's about to shut down the pool if the bonds pass. Is there something that you can do about it? The city stepped up and said, you know what, we'll try. And so obviously things changed with the two bond measures for the school district, but the city has done the process we talked about staying focused. The city council deliberated and added this to the work program, and then they gave us several $100,000 to really investigate the opportunity to do a new recreation and aquatic center. And we're working through that process right now and trying to identify costs and sites and how the community feels about it. But when people come to us with problems, as the mayor said, we try to find solutions on their behalf, and then we'll see if the citizens really want to invest in something like this. And so that leads me to my final slide. So what happens next? We do this all over again. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of work that you can see. But we've done another community survey. Coming out of that community survey, there's going to be a 2015-16 work program. It's going to be based on feedback from all of you in the neighborhood and the citizens. So we're asking you, what do you need to see? What are we doing well on? What do we need to improve on? We're going to respond with our budgets. We're going to respond with our policies, and then we're going to come back and ask again. And so we're going to try to keep up this cycle of decisive, responsive government that's really based on what you, the citizens of Kirkland, want us to do. So that's all I have, and I think we have about an hour left for questions and answers on any topic. So thank you very much. So you guys want to do mics, or should I just, I think we are supposed to microphone these so that they're on tape.
The session is being recorded, and we'll have a link on the website in a couple weeks so other people can watch it. So I think Corey's going to work one half of the room.
I guess I'll do this side.
Kurt, I'm Doug Ruff, co-chair of the Juanita Neighborhoods Association, and I wanted to ask you about the Weavers Pond initiative, which was it's a project sponsored by the Juanita Neighborhoods Association, and the frustrating thing about it is that it has a cease and desist order that's been in place for 7.5 months. It's a cleanup and restoration project. And the question I have is, are we going to try and put in place a procedure or or some kind of method so that a volunteer project sponsored by a neighborhood does not have a 7-month wait for a permit?
The short answer is yes. So sat down several times with the staff, and what we're going to try to do is, rather than be reactive, we're actually going to proactively define what you can do and how you can do it, and then put together a plan that we bring back to you and say, this is what you can do, and this is how the city can help you. And have that procedure then also be the procedure from this point forward. And that's a little different than what we have been in the past. The Kirkland municipal code is a reactive code enforcement and so forth. So, and you know, in some ways you have to be, because it's just not possible to be everywhere all the time. And so generally we wait until someone comes to us and says there's a problem, and then our enforcement officers go out and look at it. So, and that's the situation that happened here. So part of it is, when your codes say one thing, if there is any resident who's opposed to that thing and they bring it to our attention, we have to come out and we have to enforce. But clearly the situation, our process and procedures didn't help us deal with the situation the way we want to, and so we're going to change that. And so we are in the process right now, the planning department and code enforcement, looking at how to make a much more proactive plan for situations like yours. And hopefully you should actually be hearing from them soon, because I talked to Eric a couple weeks ago, and I think they're getting very close to making a presentation to you.
Could you comment, I'm Chuck Pilcher from Lakeview, could you comment on the study that was done within the last year on the relocation or possible relocation of City Hall, particularly with addressing the issue of the fact that putting City Hall next to the Justice Center would certainly help re-energize Totem Lake?
I'd also like to invite my colleagues, if anyone wanted to take any of these questions, I will see you. I see all of you. I was really excited about the idea of relocating City Hall. We got some quite a bit of information. We've discussed it a number of times, and I would just say there wasn't a consensus on the council that was the right direction for us to take, both as a fiscal decision and probably as a symbolic one, that this is the place for City Hall and the investment needs to remain here. And does any of my colleagues want to comment further on that? I thought somebody.
That's your side.
That's okay. I just wanted to add, some of the data that we got back also, and I'm a business owner downtown, right, so I get a little nervous about these things, but some of the data we got back indicated that it would have a fairly significant impact on the businesses downtown. So at least as far as I'm concerned, that is one of the reasons why I wasn't gung-ho for it.
Yep, we got to protect the downtown as well. Mr. Asher.
I can do it from here. One of the things that's been raised as part of staying here is the property to the south of City Hall. We own the rest of the block south of the City Hall currently. And one of the considerations was to put a surface parking lot in there. And my immediate reaction to that was, that's extraordinarily expensive property. If we're going to do something with it, sell it to someone and buy a whole bunch of parking spaces where hopefully we could enter from Central Way into a way to get into that parking structure and build something on that property and still be able to have the parking that we need to have downtown. It would provide some resources for the city to be able to do, you know, as normal. We are a city of champagne tastes and beer budget. So it would provide some additional resources to do the Cross-Kirkland corridor, to do possibly something toward the aquatic center, toward any number of things that we might want to do in the city. But just to put a surface parking lot to the south of this building just doesn't seem like the right kind of way to go here.
If I could just add a little bit more. So if you're interested in getting the background and details behind the discussion around moving City Hall, at the February council retreat, we put quite a bit of information together for the council and made a presentation. I think sort of the two big items that were part of discussion was we couldn't make it cost neutral. So it was going to be somewhere between a $10 and a $20 million increase to sell this place and build a new city hall somewhere. And that was a big issue for, I know many of the council members were concerned about additional costs. And the second thing is we actually got some interesting kind of eye-opening economic evaluation. And as important as we feel we were basically told you're a drop in the bucket to Totem Lake. So even going up there with 100,000 square feet and 300 people is just not a big deal. So it's not going to catalyze a whole lot of growth, but it would have a sort of reverse effect in City Hall. It does matter for downtown to have a group like this around downtown. And so it was sort of this, wouldn't do much to catalyze growth up there, would cause some harm down here, and we'd have to find another $10 to $20 million somewhere. And I think that sort of was why everyone was very intrigued by the idea, but it just sort of didn't make sense at the time. And like I said, all of that's available for anyone who wants to take a look at it.
A quick follow-up. How does that help?
Can you speak into the microphone?
How does keeping it here and moving the Justice Center to Totem Lake help the space needs for the city right here?
Let me take that. That's a great question. So we now have an empty lower level. So the police moved out. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be renovating all of City Hall. There's about $10 million in the budget that was all related to annexation of facilities that the council, when they adopted the budget to basically create the Justice Center, we also had money for maintenance center expansion for all of the folks in parks and the public works section. And then we have about $10 million set aside to renovate City Hall. So what we're going to be doing is nothing too fancy, although there's going to be a nice makeover of the council chambers, which will be really nice for the public. And also the way people are greeted at the entrance is going to be a much better customer service feel, as the mayor was talking about in her customer service initiative. But basically, we're going to be moving parks and human resources back from the 505 building where they are across the street and bringing them into the lower level. And we're going to be renovating the carpets and the HVAC systems and things like that. So it'll save us a lot of money and make our operations more efficient to move folks back into the lower level. And we will probably be able to get everyone except the folks in the annex, which are their Public Works Capital Facilities folks. We'll have everyone back in City Hall again for the first time except the folks up at the Justice Center and obviously firefighters at the fire stations. So much better use of this space.
I'm Debbie Owen. I'm from the Highlands. And I'm just kind of curious, how do you guys go about figuring out a situation like the Aquatic Center where the sites that are preferred right now, the neighborhood seems really not to want it, but it's a thing that I think a lot of people in the community would like to have. I mean, how do you go about figuring out a situation like that?
Well, we have a park board that studied a lot of material and heard from a lot of people, gave us a recommendation, kind of got to 2 sites. We started hearing from neighbors in those sites. You know, these are, problematic for various reasons. I think as such a city, we do have quite a bit of density already. So, we don't have sort of 12 or 15 acres just sitting around. So what we decided to do is the manager's recommendation to help us was to go out to the wider community with a community survey and ask about those sites. Do you want to add to that, Kurt?
And that's not, I'm not just saying this because they're my bosses, but what's so great about working with this city council is they're a very data-driven city council. And so when the school district sort of sent the citizens to us with this opportunity to look at a new aquatic center, we actually already had a lot of data from the previous parks and open space plan that we did in 2001 and 2002. And at that time, a new aquatic center was identified as something that the community wanted. So it was sort of like, someday we should have this. When we did the park committee to do the parks levy that passed, it was debated again. Should we think about a parks and aquatic center and community center? And again, it was affirmed as something that the community really needed, but the decision was, but not at this time because we're shutting down parks and closing down restrooms and we need to focus on the basics. And so that was the decision that the city council made at the time. But it was there and it was based on facts and it was based on need. And so when the school district sent folks to us and people asked, we then went out again and we did another survey and said, does the community want us to look at and explore the idea of a new aquatic center? And we had about a 57% response saying yes. that was somewhat undefined. There was no real cost yet. There was no location yet. So the council moves quickly, but they actually try to gather real data. So they had us do site evaluations, had us do traffic evaluations, had us do cost evaluations. We went through a detailed process with the park board to identify what might be in it. We really tried to hear from folks about what should make it up. And then we keep bringing that back to the city council. Maybe they don't thank us for it, but hey, is this what you want to see? Are we going in the right direction? And so I think at the last meeting, because of the neighborhood concerns, one of the things the council asked the staff to do is survey the whole city, but also see if you can identify a couple other sites that maybe aren't city-owned that might be a good location. And so as we do our second round of outreach, we're going to be asking, not only do you like the sites, but would you be willing to pay, $15 million more to have it not be at one of the Kirkland parks? And there may or may not be support for that as well. So we're going to have a whole lot more information to bring back again so that this council can make decisions based on the data. And I think when you ask how do they do it, I think they're very, very thoughtful about hearing from the citizens and then trying to do their due diligence before they make any kind of decision.
Ultimately, this will be a ballot measure. So then we're going to really find out how people feel about what we've got proposed. Oh, Jay.
You already made that point, that the final
Councilmember
decision
Arnold,
will
excuse
end up
me.
being made by the voters.
Hi, Glenn Bowman from South Rose Hill. Hopefully a quick question. I don't remember hearing this. Was this site considered as one of the aquatic center sites, given that there was discussion of moving City Hall and no?
No, I don't think we ever thought of this site.
Even with the
large enough,
other
is it?
half of the block?
This total site's about 4 acres, including the other property. And what we learned was you really need 7 to 9. You really need 5 just for the building itself, and then you probably need 7 to 9 to have a reasonable parking structure and parking cost. So we didn't look too carefully at it. It was just one of those we kind of went around and said, okay, well that's out. So
We're still exploring a partnership with Redmond, somewhere along the border. So we're in talks with them.
Karen Lightfelt from Juanita Neighborhood. Any good big development has to offer experiences to get people to come to it. Have you talked to Totem Lake about how wonderful it would be to have an aquatic center on their property?
we actually have. So you're not the first one to think about that. Councilmember Arnold raised that, and the rest of the council agreed that we should ask. So when we had our first meeting with the mall owners to talk about them coming back, we specifically did talk about that, and we said, would you be open to us talking about a recreation and aquatic center on the site? They gave a very business person answer. They said, it would depend. We're not going to say no, but it would have to pencil for us. So we said, well, we just want to make sure you keep that thought alive as you guys go about your business and think through this. This might be something we really want to talk to you about. So my guess is there is some price at which they would let it happen. We just don't know what that is yet, but we have talked about that. And what we talked about was something being sort of tucked up kind of in the northeast side up against where the hospital is, and maybe some shared parking. And so, as a concept, they didn't say no, and that's promising, but we certainly didn't get to any level of detail. So. Could it be on the CKC? Oh yeah, no, right. It would be on the CKC. It would be nice.
We always want to be careful before we give up our capacity for retail sales tax collection. Just the fiscal conservative.
Karen Edgerton from the Norkirk neighborhood. Some of the people in our neighborhood have expressed concern about parking overflow creeping from downtown into Norkirk, and I'm wondering what is the city council looking at in terms of specifically addressing parking downtown and how it's flowing into our neighborhoods?
I think that we have some information coming to us. We've had a preview. It's definitely something that the council has asked to be an action item. So we think that there's some wayfinding answers, there's some technology answers, because there maybe is more parking than people are aware of, sort of tucked around here and there. And then we're also talking about building capacity, as Mr. Asher referenced, but maybe Mr. Triplett can give us a better preview.
Well, that was a great answer. So the council in the last budget bid by budget process gave us $100,000 to explore any ways that we could bring more parking capacity into downtown to avoid issues like that, and also to benefit the downtown businesses. And so we're looking at a variety of things, including a potential parking lot, which could bring around 160 parking spaces in the property that we own to downtown. But as the mayor was saying, we also have discovered that quite a bit of time our own parking garage is kind of empty. And people in Kirkland still feel somehow it's too far, and so they may not go to check. And so if we could do things, there's a lot of new systems like you see in Seattle. Actually, John Pascal suggested this. On a walk we took about 2 years ago, he said, when you drive into Seattle and you see, 42 parking spaces at this parking garage and 72 at this parking garage, we actually think that could be somewhat useful for Kirkland, where we could actually have some technology that helps people move around. And so the report, sadly for us, David Godfrey, who's also doing the Transportation Master Plan, has had a little bit on his plate, and so it's not quite there yet. But the report is supposed to come back to the council either the second meeting in October or the first meeting in November with a preliminary look at what the potential opportunities are. And then the council has asked us to, once they get that, to take that out to the public and say, what do you think? Are there options here you like? Are there options here you don't like? And then after we get all that, we'll see about whether there's something that actually turns into a capital proposal in the budget. But the goal is to bring more parking spaces and capacity online for downtown particularly.
Thank you. Ken Alpinger, Juanita. Transportation continues to bedevil us as a city. We're surrounded by a north-south flow that engulfs our own streets. I am interested in hearing more about what our multimodal transportation master plan is coordinating, and what possibilities for improvement that could bring. And then I've got another transportation question. Back in February, you were both at the Google symposium on the various methods that the Cross-Kirkland corridor could be employed to extend new ideas about light rail or in-the-air rail, and various pretty exciting opportunities. Is there a follow-up to that symposium? Is there going to be some more? What are the next steps to that?
I'm going to let Kurt take the Advanced Transportation Symposium question. The multimodal, I just want to say that one of the messages in my State of the City has been that we're poised to take our place as a larger city. So our population grew by 30-some thousand, and I would say that, one of the things that we need to be more aggressive about is getting our fair share of grant money. And you can't get grant money unless it's in the plan. So we are working very hard on creating a lot of detailed plans with a lot of projects of all levels to improve our transportation system. And then we're aggressively seeking grant money for them. So the Juanita Master Corridor study is a perfect example that we can go shop and sort of our council is being very active, and especially council members Asher and Arnold are, I think, firm voices in the region for getting our fair share of transportation dollars. But I'm going to let Mr. Triplett take it from there.
And there's probably three main opportunities, and the corridor is probably the largest of those in Kirkland. It's going to be challenging for Kirkland to add a tremendous amount of capacity. Citizens probably wouldn't let us build, and we couldn't afford to build new lanes on Lake Washington Boulevard or others. So one of our most promising is our intelligent transportation system, and the council's given us permission. We've gotten almost $6 million worth of grants from the federal government to do what seems straightforward now, but we're a little behind the eight ball on, which is things like synchronized lights, so that traffic flow moves better. And so we're putting in a brand new system. We have turned one of our conference rooms into a very cool command and control center. And John Pascal's worked on a lot of this as well. But we are going to try to invest in all of our major arterials, but particularly 85th, 100th, 132nd, up into Totem Lake, so that we can start to move traffic better just through things like technology. The second one is we are making a huge push in the Transportation Master Plan to focus on non-motorized vehicles. And you're going to see sort of equal levels of investment in things like bike lanes and transit improvements and sidewalks coming out of the Transportation Master Plan. Because we know that ultimately part of our solution is we got to get people out of the cars. We got to get them better opportunities to get there safely in other ways. And then the final one is, of course, the Cross Kirkland corridor. So a north-south, boulevard, if you will, that goes right through the city that takes you right through all that traffic if we can make it work. And so the corridor master plan focuses a little bit on the trail, and the trail is a great transportation capacity for folks who want to bike or run. But there's a whole transit side to the master plan as well that basically says, sort of here lies transit, and we haven't quite figured out what that transit will be yet. And so the master plan was built around welcoming transit on the corridor. And so then we have to work with two entities, King County Metro and Sound Transit. And Sound Transit sort of gets first bite at transit on the corridor. Before Kirkland purchased the corridor, Sound Transit already bought a transportation easement up and down the whole corridor. And so when we bought our section, that came with it. And so Sound Transit gets to decide if and how they want to put transit on the corridor. So part of what has happened since the symposium is we're sort of waiting for their process. And what I will tell you, sort of the sneak preview of their process is that they have looked at our corridor and they've basically said it's cheaper and moves more people to focus on bus rapid transit on 405, and that they're not likely to propose, particularly light rail, but probably not likely to propose much Sound Transit transportation on the corridor. And so, in my humble opinion, the day after that announcement, that I want to start over with, now what can we do that's really cool from a city perspective, working either with Metro or with some of these advanced transportation technologies. And personally, my favorite is the Cross Kirkland Skyway, I'm now calling it, which is the gondola system to take us beautiful, spectacular, iconic view, zoom us down into Bellevue. But I think we'll have many opportunities for some pretty cool transportation on the corridor once Sound Transit makes a decision. And they're supposed to do that in December, January of this year, have a big sense of where they're going. And I think once that happens, we can then figure out what Kirkland's going to do next.
And we are in those meetings with Sound Transit, working for Kirkland. Oh my gosh, it's Glenn Peterson. Hi, Glenn.
Hi, Amy. Glenn Peterson from the Moss Bay neighborhood. I don't get a great sense of, when we have new businesses come to Kirkland, be it we have a Google build a new building, we have, new retail. I can understand the sales tax coming in. New auto dealers, I worship the ground you walk on. Because I know sales tax is an important component. I asked someone on staff and didn't get an answer really understood about what really brings in the money better. The construction of an office, does an office building and filling it with office workers ultimately do more than building retail, or does building housing ultimately do more for us economically? Or, what is it that really is going to help us close this? And to make it a two-part question, sales tax credit issue, which is going to explode on us in a few years.
Okay. So, that's a challenging question to answer, and what it depends on is what's your priority. So we can look at some of our neighbors to get different answers to that. So probably the safest and most predictable would make yourself entirely dependent on property tax. And if you look at the city of Sammamish, that's what they've chosen to do. They have basically no real retail base. They have basically no industry. They have phenomenal homes that are all $1 million, and their property tax is $3.80 per thousand, and ours is $1.80 per thousand. So that's the difference, right? So they do it all based on property tax, and that's stable, and it's a decent economic development strategy. But it clogs the heck out of their streets because everybody leaves Sammamish to come to everywhere else for jobs and to buy anything, and so it is not without its own consequence, right? If you go to a big city like Bellevue or Seattle, they make a major investment in having a downtown core. And the downtown cores, financial institutions, Microsoft and others, Redmond's another good example, bring in tremendous money from either B&O tax or head taxes and things like that. And you have, if you are large enough to make sure you always have 30 to 40,000 people coming, that's a huge and appropriate economic development strategy. The challenge for Kirkland has been, we only have one or two of those kind of towers, and if that, if you look at what happened with Russell Investments in Tacoma, if Google decides to leave and you put everything you have in Google, then you end up with a giant empty building, right? And now you're competing with Bellevue and Seattle, and maybe no one ever comes back. If you focus only on car dealerships, which is sort of a South County, does a lot of that, you are subject to the boom and bust of the general economy. And so Kirkland has, I think, over the decades made a different decision than a lot of cities, which is we've tried to be balanced. And so, and I'm very proud of that. It's been nice to come into a city like that. Doesn't mean it hasn't always worked for us either, but so we have a nice mix of retail, we have a nice mix of office, and we have a nice mix of sound residential property tax. And we have a fairly well-to-do population that's also willing to pass ballot measures. So we have kind of a really nice sweet spot where it's a combination of all of those things, and we're not dependent on any one of those things. But if you want to know, like, what's your best bang for the buck in the short and medium term, it would probably be to zone for auto dealerships. It is. It's, if you can keep them alive and keep them thriving. What's that? Yeah, as long as, and that's what Tracy Dunlap, my finance director, would tell you. But that may not be sustainable over time because it's subject to global forces and national forces and not just what happens locally. So, you boom and bust with those. And that's what happened to Kirkland, actually, is the single biggest drop-off came in car dealerships. And so we went from making almost $14 million a year in sales tax going down to 11. So we lost $3 million like that on sales tax. So you have to have a mixed strategy, I think, if you're a city like Kirkland to survive. And so I think what the Planning Commission is doing in the comp plan is very thoughtful because you're giving us a little bit of each, and we want a little bit of each so that it's a balance again. But people do pick the extremes, and the extremes are successful, but we're not really big enough, I think, to do either one of the extremes.
You kind of, Mark Nelson from Market, you kind of touched on it, but you got me curious. What's the percentage roughly, not exactly, between sales tax, property tax? In other words, if you look at the city's revenue, the buckets, what's the percentage of the various buckets?
Well, the good news for us is actually about a third, a third, a third. So we're actually very balanced right now. So roughly $18 to $20 million each. And then there's other revenues that come in, but that's basically about a third, a third, a third. Utility tax is the other big piece, which is the tax the city places on utilities, which comes into the general fund. So that's a fairly stable source as well, but it doesn't grow very fast, but doesn't shrink either. So,
John Pascal, Finhill. So one of the successful programs from this year was the neighborhood safety program that the city implemented, and a lot of us participated in, and saw a lot of great project ideas come out from the community. I had the pleasure of reviewing over 300 ideas from our neighborhood. I was wondering if you could give us a little preview of what you're recommending for the next 2-year budget cycle, if that program might be expanded, or is it going to continue on as kind of first proposed?
That's the whole key. Is the whole theme of decisive, responsive government is fixing problems. So I think the council direction will be to continue the program, but we'll see if we have any money.
Look at the time. Okay, it looks like so the safety program, thank you for participating on it, and I think it was a tremendous success. And so there is no question we're going to have the program continue. And at a minimum, the money from the levies that are dedicated to pedestrian safety will be in there. You're actually asking a question that's literally at the heart of my discussions with Public Works and Finance right now about what do I think I can put in addition to that as a recommendation to the City Council. Because we've definitely heard from neighborhoods and the council that they'd like to see that program grow. And so without knowing exactly what I'm going to do right now, what I can tell you is I'm likely to propose the council more than just the minimum that's in the levies, because we do want to create opportunities, and it was so successful, and we want it to be successful citywide. And my goal is to put as much as I can, but there is a balancing factor. So I think you'll see more than just the 150,000. How much more is we're going to tally up tomorrow morning, and we'll see tomorrow afternoon, and then that will turn into a recommendation to the City Council. But it will be alive and well, and it will probably be more than just the levy money. And the council may add to that.
Hi, Laura Hine, Central Houghton neighborhood. And first of all, I want to applaud you for the savings that you made on the public safety building decision. I think that was a fabulous decision, and it's resulted in a really, really cool situation. What I'm curious about is that millions of dollars that you saved that you would have otherwise had to spend, if you've thought at all about perhaps putting some of that into an investment in solar power using that site's openness, both the roof and the parking area, to make it an even more fabulous situation.
Okay. So unfortunately, because we borrowed the money, the savings means we're in less debt than where we were before. So, while that was a good thing, it didn't mean we had a ton of money sitting aside. It just meant we borrowed less, and we actually we're the last people to get a Build America bond. We literally, I think, came in on the last day of the program and saved. Oh, Tracy will have to give me the estimate. We saved millions of dollars in financing costs because we were able to do it, and this was actually a really quick turnaround that the council did. We were actually able to. It's actually kind of a remarkable story if you're a finance geek like some of us are. But so we did save a lot of money, but it was all in debt service and in avoided debt costs. However, having said that, the building itself is set up to receive solar power, so it doesn't happen to have it on the panels right now, but we can. And so that is one of sort of the next step we're trying to figure out after we get the acoustics of the place settled down. We're going to come back and look at that. And I know that the City Council has been very interested in making sure when we can make issues like that happen, that we do. And so we built it to connect, and we're going to try to figure out, again, through aggressive grant programs and other things, try to find a way to get solar in there so we can make it happen. And we are also assessing that for the City Hall remodel. So that will be one of the elements we look at in the City Hall remodel. Oh, Jay, yes.
And I'd also add it's something we've asked to be looked at with the Juanita pool.
Yes.
And saying that we'd like that to be solar ready, and also look at other opportunities.
Just for fun, I saw a really cool article about solar trails. And so there's a hard surface you can actually put down for bike trails that actually is solar. So I don't know much about it yet, but I thought about that. Hey, there's this cool pilot program we could do. So stay tuned. Right. I just don't know if they get hot. I don't know if. Yeah. Is it? So there you go. So maybe there as well. Other questions?
We got one back here. What is being done or planned to be done with the former Totem Lake City building?
Oh, where the port was?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that was sold. It was part of the financing package for the Justice Center.
So Karen Lightfeld, Juanita neighborhood. I heard Jenny say, and then kind of what you just said about being concerned about retail at Totem Lake, and you don't want to give up retail. But we are at a real disadvantage in this city because the big retailers are located all around us, and so we have the non-compete circle. And then in Juanita, we have a mixed-use development where none of the mixed use has been rented in, 2 years. It's totally vacant, the whole building. So I'd like to encourage you to not say that an aquatic center at Totem Lake would take away from the retail, because there must be some tax involved with that too. Plus, it would be a draw to get people to their development, make it a stronger development.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. My opinion is just one, and our council comes to decisions based on consensus, and whatever the will of the council is, what will happen. But I hear your concern, And we have been in conversations with the owners of the mall to explore that possibility.
Karen Edgerton, Norkirk again. This is more of a comment. I moved here 11 years ago, and we really fell in love with the Kirkland downtown and the waterfront. And we've seen a lot of change in 11 years. I know people have lived here a lot longer than us, but overall, I'm actually quite happy with the direction the city has gone and what's happening downtown and the vibrancy and how many people are down there. And it's kind of cool. So I just want to let you guys know that I think we're kind of headed in the right directions.
Thank you very much. That's a lovely statement. Thank you.
Hi, B. Nay on Moss Bay. And as long as we've got a lot of people here from neighborhood leadership, and Kurt, you mentioned a bit about the Kirkland 2035 process. Maybe you could give us just a quick summary of next steps in the Kirkland 2035 process, including comp plan update and neighborhood plans.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm not totally the expert on that, but I know if you go to our website, you can get the detailed dates, and we're going to actually report to the City Council at the next council meeting on October 7th with much more detail about what happens next. But the November 12th open house is one of our big moments where we're sort of going to come back with the next stage of the comp plan and the transportation master plan. I think the goal is to get the Planning Commission, and I have two Planning Commission members here who probably speak to this better than I can, through the major elements of the comp plan by spring. And then the goal is still, we're trying to aim at the council adopting this sometime around June or July of 2015. But what's going to come out at the November 12th meeting is, in addition to meetings with individual neighborhoods, is if there's any comp plan changes for the neighborhood plans that came out of our conversations with the neighborhoods, those will be brought up at that point and discussed and then debated by the Planning Commission and then ultimately the council. So, and I know that not just at that open house, but we're going to have another process with each of the neighborhood organizations to say, here's what we heard, here's what that might turn into in terms of a comp plan or zoning change, and what do you all think? So our goal at the end of the process is that we've sort of reset the base for the neighborhood plans. And so we've had a little bit of debate about what does that mean, but some of them hadn't been looked at all for decades, and our point of this process is not to say that we've done a full-on review and update, but that at least we've given every neighborhood a chance to say, is there something there that's really itching or has got to be fixed, and if so, we can fix it and we can kind of bring it up to the current time. One of the other things that the council's made a commitment to, as they just recently passed a resolution on this, is that when they adopt the comp plan itself in June, included in that adoption will also be a cycle for neighborhood plan updates that will happen in between major comp plan update cycles. So then people won't have to guess anymore. They'll know that, you know, yours is coming in 2017 or yours is coming in 2019, and then we'll stay on that cycle so that all of the neighborhood plans stay updated between the comp plans.
Kurt, if I could just mention too, as the person who updates that Kirkland 2035 webpage, I know that last week I loaded the some of the elements. So when you go to the webpage, you'll see the current adopted version of, say, the housing element, the tracked changes, and then like the clean tracked changes. So if you're really into that kind of detail, just know that we are posting all those versions once those elements are kind of ready for that.
I know that as part of Kirkland 2035, strengthening neighborhood centers is one of the goals. And I can think of Kingsgate, Inglewood, Bridle Trails, Houghton Center are neighborhood centers that I know are on our minds. A couple of those, especially Bridle Trails and Houghton Center, overlap more than one neighborhood. So what are your plans for this kind of the broader discussion with regard to those, any of the neighborhood centers, because they impact more people than just the individual neighborhoods that actually where they're located?
So the neighborhood centers is kind of a hot topic. And so what the ultimate resolution of all that will be, I'm not totally sure, but I can tell you where I think it's going and at least what's happened so far. So in general, there seems to be some consensus about focusing on downtown and Totem Lake as the sort of big places for real discussion about major capacity and potential changes. The feedback we're getting from the neighborhood is sort of maybe this is not the time to spend a lot of time on the other business centers. So I think the intent of at least the Planning Commission and Council action at the moment is probably not to spend a lot of time and energy focused on those and really try to make sure we can do the things that we can do well and with consensus of the community. In the last council meeting, when the City Council adopted their resolution laying out their next round of update process, particularly for the Houghton Everest Business Center, the discussion was to focus on that first after the comp plan is adopted because it has such intensity of feeling around it from the various communities. I thought your email about don't forget there's more communities that use that than just those two was a good one. The council gave us the direction to pull together a stakeholder group as part of that resolution that will include and will add the other neighborhoods, and that group will work until July of 2016 and make recommendations to the Planning Commission, who will then make recommendations to the council. So that's how that particular group is going to be dealt with. The resolution went on to say, and I think the Planning Commission and the Houghton Community Council also said, to sort of hold off on the other business districts until after the comp plan update and after the Houghton Everest Business Center is dealt with. So that could change. I mean, there might be something that comes out of the woods that makes it important to focus on one of the other business districts. But I think right now the council's really focused on really downtown and Totem Lake is the place we really want to make things happen. But there are council members here if they want to add anything. I don't.
Mr. Asher, were you gonna?
No, it sounds good to me.
Okay.
And I would add that we recognize that for the new neighborhoods, there is no existing neighborhood plan, and that is definitely a high priority. And the Finn Hill Neighborhood Alliance is one that's working on a proposal that we're hopefully able to help make some progress on that to ensure that we're getting neighborhood plans for our new neighborhoods.
Doug Ruff, Juanita again. Speaking of the Finn Hill Neighborhood Alliance, I've met with several members of the Finn Hill Neighborhood Alliance as well as some of the people from the Juanita neighborhoods, and I've met with actually some City of Kenmore planning people about the possibility of connecting the Cross Kirkland corridor to the Burke-Gilman Trail through Juanita and Finn Hill. And are there plans to do something like that as well as connect some of the other neighborhoods such as Rose Hill to the Cross Kirkland corridor?
Sort of. So, in the master plan, one of the focuses was really on the main spine itself. But one of the key, there was 4 main themes of the master plan. One was connect Kirkland. And so what the master plan says is, in addition to what you do here on this main spine, the purpose of the corridor is to connect everything, to connect all of our neighborhoods and all that. And so we are getting a lot of feedback from almost every neighborhood about, okay, how do we connect? How do you prioritize a connection? And so one of the things that John was talking about, projects are starting to emerge in the suggested project, which is on our website through the Neighborhood Safety Program. People want to connect to the corridor. I got invited up by the Finn Hill Neighborhood Alliance, and I went and walked up on the some of those areas where they're thinking about creating the connection, and we think it's a great vision, and we want to start figuring out how to do that. So we want to support that vision of an ultimate connection that goes all the way up there. All of that sort of fits back into the big capital discussion we're going to have starting in 2015 about what can we afford and how do we do it. But I think we would all love to get a Finn Hill connection down to Juanita Beach Park, which would then come across Forbes Creek Drive and hit the corridor. I mean, that's everybody's interest in making that happen. So we want as much connectivity as possible. And one of the cool things that we did through this process, we were getting all sorts of friends, and we were one of the first people to reach out for the Trust for Public Lands on the Cross Kirkland corridor and the whole East Side Rail corridor. And so they did for us for free what they're now charging other cities to do, and they went through a very elaborate GIS connections process that they used their national TPL GIS folks, and they just came out and met with us probably about a month ago, and they gave us all of their data. They did exactly that kind of thing. They looked at everything from a connection from Finn Hill all the way to where's the best place to stub in a connection from a street or a dead end, and so it's really fantastic work, and it's going to be a model that they use for other cities. what they're going to charge other cities for it. But we got it because we were sort of willing to be the guinea pig, and we gave them a lot of our own GIS data. So we know that's the next thing up is how do you connect to the corridor? Everyone's going to want to do it. And it's important that we make sure that they can do it because that's how we'll create capacity and how we'll create community.
And I do think that that's an area for neighborhood associations to take the lead and coming up with consensus around what are great access points and then working with the city to create projects around those.
Sue Contreras, Bridle Trails, South Rose Hill. Back to parking, kind of a two-part question. Do you know if the McLeod project on Lake Street, when they build between Hector's and Milagro, are there any plans for underground parking there that will provide public access to parking? And the second part is the Lake and Central lot. Is there any talk of double decking that or triple decking that?
The McLeod project, I know that we had been in ongoing conversations with them about purchasing public spaces, and that any development that goes along the boulevard, it's kind of our policy, I'm not sure if it's a stated policy, that we would work with developers to buy or to partner to create public parking spaces. So I'm not sure about the specifics of where we are with McLeod. Are you?
At the moment, he sort of, I don't know if suspended is the right word. We just haven't heard from him in a while, so we're not sure exactly where he is on his project. So we have explored the idea of us partnering on space with him, and we haven't gotten a definitive answer on that. What he has said is that his parking will be probably at least charge parking, so people can access it. The public can actually access it if you want to pay for it. And he'll have some downtown and some nighttime parking, so he'll have an opportunity to bring some capacity on if he chooses to keep it all as his own. And that's actually true of some of the other downtown developments. There's extra parking down there. We just have to find a way to get it out. And one of the ways that the report that's going to come back to the council is going to talk about potential ways to do that. So there's a couple dozen spaces under the Bank of America building, for example, that possibly the city could lease, or possibly those folks could charge for if we had, again, sort of an electronic sign that said, there's 27 spaces in the Bank of America building, and it costs you $1 an hour. Maybe that will help. So every time one comes up, we do have this conversation. It's not totally in our control. And so at the moment, there's nothing concrete about city-owned spaces, but he has definitely said he intends the space to be available, but he would probably charge for it.
And Lake and Central is a topic that I think the council's ready to discuss again. So at least Councilmember Nixon, I know, is. Yep, he says thumbs up. So we know that's a city-owned property, and a surface parking lot is definitely not its highest and best use. And we think it could be a wonderful signature at the corner of our city. But what that exactly would look like is probably the subject for the next retreat.
While we're in that neighborhood, anything about the antique mall that you can talk about, that property?
I don't think we have any updates on the antique mall. We do stay in touch, and we're aware of that as a very important asset to our downtown.
Just so you know, we basically send anyone and everyone down to talk to her when someone comes to us, and we know that very lucrative offers have been made to the owner to do all kinds of things. And at the moment, she's chosen not to do anything with any of that. We've even tried to talk to her about taking down the existing building just to create more spaces, and she doesn't want to do that either. So, it's an interesting scenario. She definitely has a very valuable property, and at the moment, she's just really not interested in it. But, in real, like, for example, when GoDaddy was struggling to find space, they had a lot of money and they were willing to talk about basically building just for themselves down there, and they met with her and she said no. So we're trying, but it's not owned by us, and Maryland is interested in not doing anything yet, but there'll be something. She at least takes the meetings, so that's good. So sooner or later, somebody will be able to figure out something, I think.
As someone who, Nora Carlson, I'm in Central Houghton neighborhood, and I work at the Chamber of Commerce, and I have a parking spot that I can park in. There are designated spots for employees, and we're encouraged to park there. But I know that I've heard that there are many people who work downtown Kirkland who move their cars throughout the day. Every 2 hours they move to a different spot, that there is not parking designated for a lot of employees, and that false. Sorry.
Parking the library garage.
Okay, to piggyback on that comment from Glenn, I guess there are some safety issues that I've heard about. People are uncomfortable parking down below in the parking garage, things that they have observed down there, so that is not being used by some people because they're just uncomfortable. Anyway, that's one part. Another of what I was going to bring up is that I heard that there was some idea of having a shuttle in Kirkland. We have good bus transportation, but I heard something about perhaps an electric shuttle that could run throughout Kirkland as a quicker way to get around for people to not have to park their cars down in the city, that they could pick up that shuttle and take it somewhere, hop on it again, and it would be looping. So it would be something in addition to our bus transportation. And my final thing, if I may, is I've seen in the city of Edmonds that they have 3-hour parking throughout their downtown, which gives people a little bit more time to shop or be in a restaurant or do both before they leave. Have you ever thought of increasing the parking to 3 hours rather than 2?
So it's good that you're bringing up all these great ideas, and there's so many council members here because this will help inform our conversation. I had thought that we were doing license plate recognition equipment that would identify employees moving their car around, that it wouldn't be the old chalk. It would be the license plate would be recognized. I think I would be interested in the 3-hour idea. And then, just as part of the parking conversation, we are talking about building infrastructure. So not just wayfinding and technology, the Kirkland parking app, but also building some capacity. So that's all sort of bubbling up again.
And that was one of the impetuses behind, trying to bring on new capacity is just, we always unfortunately try to hold out for we need the next big parking garage, and we never have the money for that. So can you get in 150 spaces instead of waiting for the 500 space parking garage that you may never get a chance to build? Every one of the issues you've talked about has been struggled with for years, decades even, and we kind of go back and forth. So the mayor is correct. So currently today, it is still against city code for an employee, a downtown employee, to park downtown. Okay, and that's on the books. And what we do is we give people a free pass to park in the bottom of the parking garage instead. Okay, and so if you go down there, you can park. If you just get a parking pass, we give them out for free at the Public Works Department. As you say, for a variety of reasons, some maybe we could do a better job of security, but some just for basic convenience, people don't tend to use it. And so we do now with the recognition software, we know who's violating that law. So even if they move their car every 2 hours, they're still in violation. We have chosen at this point not to aggressively ticket, but we're going to have a debate with the city council about whether we want to start doing that, because in the end, the folks who are doing it are necessary for the functioning of downtown, and they tend to be folks who also don't have a lot of money. So if you're hitting up waiters and waitresses and baristas and dishwashers for restaurants downtown with $25 parking tickets all the time, it's also not sustainable. So it's a real challenge for the city, because you've got the balance of the very same business owners also want the spaces to turn over, and it's their employees who are using the spaces. So it's a great catch-22, and I learn something new about it every time. And so one of the reasons we're trying to figure out the technology and capacity and all those things is to see if we can make some chunks at solving that problem downtown. If Park Place happens, or I should say when Park Place happens, there'll also be, 2,000 new parking stalls that will come on that will not always be available at the daytime, but will be available at night. And so we have been talking with them as well about the opportunity to use those at nighttime.
I'm going to do a little name dropping here. I had lunch with the mayor of Bellevue today, and she said, "Can you believe that the Old Town Bellevue businesses are asking the city to build parking for them?"
Sure.
I said, absolutely, I can believe that. So, I mean, it's not a unique problem. We have a bit of a geographic advantage and disadvantage being one side of our main street as a lake. But anyway, it's in the works. Mr. Asher, please.
Even during the extraordinarily successful days of Oktoberfest, there were available parking spaces in the 4-hour parking spaces in the library garage. Yeah, so there is parking available. It's not in front of the store that you want to go in, or the restaurant necessarily.
I don't want to leave here tonight without asking you to acknowledge to your staff the excellent work that everybody in this building does in making us feel welcome and appreciated and feel like they are working for each one of us individually. And I've never walked into City Hall without feeling welcome and helped. And everybody I've ever called at City Hall has returned my call. I get answers to emails. I just feel like you guys are doing a really good job, and I think that culture is established by the leadership we have, and I thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Chuck, for saying that. And I think you're absolutely right. I am just proud to work with these people. They do a great job, and they have good hearts, and they truly want to serve the citizens of Kirkland. We're lucky to have them.
Can't add to that. Thank you.
For those that are here that don't normally attend your neighborhood meetings, your neighborhood leaders are here. Talk to them and check and see what topics are up and when your next neighborhood meeting is. Those are important organizations to the resilience of this community. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, are we done? So thank you very much for including us in your meeting. We really are honored and privileged to be here, and thank you for your activism and your advocacy and your involvement and your volunteerism. You make Kirkland the special place that it is, our home.